Hello, I'm Andie Sophia Fontaine, editor at Iceland Review. Have you ever wondered what Icelanders think of tourists? Well, we're going to get into that and a whole lot more here on Iceland News Review. So when you come to Iceland, if you don't want to spend every single day eating at a cafe or a restaurant, you're probably going to end up going to a grocery store. And there's a new grocery store that's entered the market. It's called Prís, which is kind of an anglification of price. Anglification? Is that a word? Anyway, of price, even though in Icelandic we have a word for this, verð. And they're a new discount chain, and just the arrival of this discount grocery store chain has seemed to have sparked a price war amongst our existing grocery stores. The Icelandic Confederation of Labor, which goes over the prices of the most popular items in grocery stores every year, they've noticed a 0.5% drop in prices between July and August. The drops include bonus lowering their prices by 19%, Krónan and Netto by 9% each, and Hagkaup by 33%. So what do all these numbers mean exactly? So I want to give you some words of advice when you come to Iceland and you want to do some grocery shopping. Now, these different stores are going to have, of course, different prices, but also serve different functions and different needs. If you just want to get like the basics, the absolute basics, go to Bonus. That's the store with the pink pig on it. They have the cheapest prices for all the basic goods. If you just need to grab a quick snack, the green store, 1011, they're generally open 24 hours. I think they're all open 24 hours actually. And if you want to grab a quick snack or a drink, that's where you go. The basics there are a little bit more expensive than they are in Bonus. Generally speaking, that's not like a solid statement, but that's mostly what 1011 serves a purpose for. Krónan is also a bit discounted, but they have a wider variety, generally speaking, than Bonus on some items. Hagkaup is kind of a higher end supermarket. Like the prices of general goods are generally going to be higher, but harder to find items are going to be available there. So just bear that in mind when you come to Iceland and you want to stock up before going on a camping trip or just, I don't know, locking yourself in your hotel room for a week if that's your thing. The eruption is over as of September 6th. However, as I reported last time, there has been some ground uplift detected in the Svartsengi area. And as the name would imply, that means that the surface of the ground is rising. And in a volcanic area, that's generally a very strong indication that there's magma accumulating under the surface. And, here we go again. But when can we expect that eruption to happen? Well, a man by the name of Benedict Gunnar Ófeigsson, who is the head of deformation measurements at the Icelandic Meteorological Office. Now that's a specialized field. He believes that we could be looking at an eruption in the next 3 months, perhaps by late November. And what they're noticing is that while the eruptions may be getting more powerful, they're also spacing out further apart. That being said, it's a little too soon to say that the eruptions are going to be over anytime soon. It's impossible to predict when that will happen, at least within a human time frame. In a geological time frame, they're going to be going on forever. Well, not forever, perhaps, like not until the heat death of the universe, but as long as the Earth is active, they'll be going on there. But I want to emphasize one particular point about this, in that it is safe still to travel to Iceland. There's been a lot of misconceptions in the media, like when we talk about hazard areas and that the risk assessment for a particular area has been raised. This generally is just referring to a very, very localized area. And it doesn't even pose a risk to the airports because we're talking about lava plumes. It's ash clouds that you have to worry most about when it comes to flying because of the damage that ash can do to plane engines. As you may remember from the Eyjafjallajökull eruption in 2010, there was a huge ash cloud and flights were shut down to and from Iceland until this ash cloud blew over. But this particular eruption, which is now over, those eruptions that have been happening have posed absolutely no risk to flights. Don't go near the eruption area if you value your safety and if you respect our rescue worker volunteers. but it's still definitely safe to come and go to Iceland. I'm here at Laugardalslaug swimming pool in the lovely Laugardal neighborhood of Reykjavik. And if you take a look at this pool, you might notice something is missing. I'll give you a hint. It's water. This pool is going to be closed for the next 2 weeks, but when it reopens, it's going to be better than ever. See, pools in Iceland and in Reykjavik, every single year, they generally close them down for a week to do routine maintenance and cleaning, and like the water is cleaned, of course, several times a day, but just like of the actual masonry and things like that. Laugardalslaug, though, is, as you can see, enormous. And so it's going to take 2 weeks for them to do everything they need to do, but when it's open again, it's going to be bigger. Well, not bigger, I'm sorry. It's going to be better than ever. They're going to be doing some basic cleaning of the masonry here. They're going to do some repainting. They're going to do some repairs to the masonry. They're working on this water slide up here, I see. Very popular water slide. And it's due to reopen on September 25th. So when you come here, it's a really great swimming pool, but there are many, many other swimming pools in Reykjavik that you can choose from while you're waiting for this one to reopen. Swimming culture is a big part of Icelandic life. Icelanders love to go to the pool, and not just for doing laps. They also like to come here to socialize and gossip. Like over here, for example, you see these jacuzzis, these hot pots. It is extremely popular, especially for middle-aged folks and the elderly, well, people of all ages really, to sit in, pardon me, to sit in these hot pots and gossip or share news from the neighborhood, maybe even do some business deals and what have you. And it's a social occasion, it's a family occasion, it's even a romantic occasion if you get to the point where you're comfortable around somebody enough to let them see you in a bathing suit. But it's extremely important part of Icelandic social life, the swimming pools. And so I'm sure that there are many people who are eagerly awaiting the reopening of this swimming pool on September 25th. Yesterday, Iceland's government offices made a very important announcement. Minister of Justice Guðrún Hafsteinsdóttir is going to be submitting a bill to Parliament this fall that could extend international protection for Ukrainians for up to 5 years. So just to give you a little background on how this works. So as you may remember, on February of 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. And as a result of this, Iceland, in March 2022, instituted what is known as collective protection due to mass displacement for Ukrainians. This is actually outlawed in Article 44 of the Law on Foreigners, whereby when you apply for international protection in Iceland, you normally have to go through a very lengthy protection application process, and it can take a very long time to get your application approved, if it even is at all. In most cases, it's not. But for Ukrainian citizens, under this particular clause, Article 44 of the Law on Foreigners, they were granted collective protection for mass displacement, due to mass displacement, where they're just granted international protection on the basis of national origin. So just to give you some context as to the effect that this has had, according to Statistics Iceland, on January 1st, 2022, there were 468 Ukrainian nationals registered as living in Iceland. On January 1st of this year, there are 3,704. So we're talking about a lot of people. However, one stipulation of this particular law is that beyond a certain number of years, this protection expires, and so that needs to be renewed. And that's why the minister is submitting this bill, to be able to extend this another 5 years. And hopefully the invasion of Ukraine is not going to last another 5 years. I know a lot of people are anxious to go home, and it's a horrible situation. But for the folks that are here, they need the peace of mind to know that they're going to be taken care of and they have a safe place to live until such time as peace revisits us again. If you visited Iceland as a tourist, I really hope that everyone has been nice to you and treated you well. Icelanders do have a reputation for hospitality, but have you ever wondered what they actually think amongst themselves of tourists. Well, I'll tell you. The Icelandic Tourism Research Center has published a new poll which showed that the overwhelming majority of Icelanders have a positive attitude towards tourists now. And I say now because about 10 years ago, the discourse was a little bit negative. But there's reasons for this. You see, in 2010, as I mentioned, we had this big eruption of Eyjafjallajökull. And at that time, the economy was still recovering from the 2008 global financial crisis. And so while the country was very cheap, there weren't a lot of people doing much traveling, you see, because no one had any money. But by 2010, most countries were on the road to recovery, as was Iceland, but prices were still very low here. And the eruption of this giant volcano, which drew the attention of the world, suddenly kicked off a tourism boom. And so in the years that followed, the 2 or 3 years that followed, there was this huge tourism boom, numbers like we had never seen before, and people were not really used to seeing very busy streets. And so that may explain why there was a somewhat negative attitude towards tourists at that time, but since then we've grown to enjoy it, apparently, because the majority of Icelanders have a positive attitude towards tourists, and that's taken in a general sort of scope, because regionally it can vary. For example, in the south, there is an increasing number of people who feel that there are too many tourists, and if you've ever visited the south of Iceland, you might understand why, because it's very sparsely populated. There's a lot of sites of natural wonder down there, though, and so when there's a great deal of people in an area that's not used to a great deal of people, can be a little bit difficult to adjust to. Conversely, in Suðurnes, which is the Reykjanes Peninsula in southwest Iceland, where the airport is located in the Blue Lagoon, people there have a very, very positive attitude towards tourists. And I often say that Suðurnes is one of the most overlooked parts of the country when it comes to people visiting this country. And it's true. A lot of people think of Suðurnes as the area that you drive through from the airport to Reykjavik, and the part that you drive through when you're going your way to the airport again. But that's a big mistake. There are so many places in Suðurnes that are worth checking out. It's a beautiful and eerie part of the country, well worth exploring. You should absolutely take the time to check that out. And when you do, if you want to rent a car, we recommend checking out Blue Car Rental, who are the sponsors of this episode. Lastly, on Iceland News Review, the naming committee. The Icelandic Naming Committee is in the news again. Now, for the unfamiliar, we have a legal body, the naming committee, wherein if there's a new name that you either want to give yourself or your child, you submit an application for this name to the committee, and they approve it or reject it based on 3 criteria. Number 1, they look to see that this name can be declined in accordance with Icelandic grammar. They look to see that there's some sort of historic precedent for this name, that this name has been used before in this country. And number 3, and most controversially, they determine whether or not a child could be bullied for having this particular name. And this is relevant to this latest ruling. So they approved the name Kilja as a female name. And what's interesting about that is that Kilja is also the word for a paperback novel. However, they rejected the name Alft as a woman's name. Alft means swan, but when you say Kettlingar Alft, it's a very nasty word. It's a sexist insult for a woman. And so they decided that naming a child Alft could lead to other kids in class, calling them Kettlingar Alft and bullying them for this. And so they rejected this name altogether. They pointed out, however, in the ruling that if you do want to name a female child after a swan, there's an existing name, Svanna, which is the feminine version of the masculine name, Svanur. And so there you have it. That's all I have for you today here on Iceland News Review. All the news stories that we discussed today are linked in the description, as well as a link to our sponsor of this episode, Blue Car Rental. I'm Andie Sophia Fontaine. We'll see you next week. Be good to each other.